trapped between love and lies, when a narcissist never gives you the ending you deserve. Hey there, welcome back to the channel. If you've ever found yourself trapped in the emotional maze of a narcissistic relationship, one that left you dizzy, confused, and craving answers, you're not alone. Today, we're peeling back the layers of one of the most haunting experiences survivors often face: the desperate search for closure. But before we dive in, take a moment to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because what we discuss here goes far beyond pop psychology. This is about reclaiming your peace, your power, and the truth you were never allowed to have. When we talk about closure, most of us imagine that cinematic moment of resolution. The villain gets exposed, justice prevails, and the hero walks into the sunset, liberated, vindicated, whole. Psychologists often say this desire for closure is deeply human. According to Dr. Ari Kruglansky, a cognitive psychologist who pioneered need for closure theory, our brains crave narrative completion. We long for emotional symmetry that restores order after chaos. It's why we love movies that end with poetic justice, why the hero's triumph soothes something deep within us. It's not just entertainment, it's emotional regulation through storytelling. But what happens when your story doesn't end that way? What happens when your villain, the narcissist, walks away without ever acknowledging the wreckage they left behind? That's when closure becomes an open wound that never quite scabs over. I remember reading about how the movie Pretty Woman was almost given a tragic ending. Julia Roberts' character was supposed to walk away, heartbroken, no fairy tale in sight, but test audiences hated it. We didn't want realism, we wanted redemption. Psychologists say this reflects a universal coping mechanism. We want to believe suffering serves a purpose, that good people are rewarded, and bad ones get what they deserve. It helps restore our sense of moral order. So when a narcissist discards you coldly, abruptly, often while blaming you, you're left in a psychological freefall. There's no justice scene, no apology monologue, just silence. And silence is one of the most psychologically destabilizing experiences a trauma survivor can endure. According to trauma specialist Dr. Judith Herman, unresolved endings create a state of frozen grief. You can't mourn what you never had closure for. Instead, you cycle through disbelief, anger, and yearning, searching for the missing dialogue that will make it all make sense. Let's talk about apologies. A genuine apology, as Dr. Harriet Lerner explains in Why Won't You Apologize, requires three things: empathy, accountability, and behavioral change. But narcissists are empathy deficient by design. Their entire psychological structure depends on preserving an inflated self-image. To apologize sincerely would mean confronting their own flaws, and for them, that's existentially threatening. So when they do apologize, it's often performative, a PR statement for the sake of optics. You've probably heard something like, "I'm sorry you feel that way." That's not remorse. That's manipulation dressed as contrition. It's a linguistic sleight of hand meant to neutralize your emotions without taking any real responsibility. Psychologists call this pseudo-apology behavior, and it's a hallmark of narcissistic defense mechanisms. You're left emptier than before, wondering why even the apology feels like gaslighting. Then comes the matter of accountability, or more accurately, the complete absence of it. In therapy, narcissists are often described as accountability escape artists. Every time you try to address the problem, they shift the blame, rewrite history, or play the victim. Dr. Ramani Durvasula, a clinical psychologist specializing in narcissistic abuse, notes that this tactic, known as deflection, is their way of maintaining dominance. Accountability equals vulnerability, and vulnerability threatens their fragile ego. You might try to reason with them, thinking if I can just make them see what they've done, they'll understand. But reasoning with a narcissist is like debating gravity, it's futile. You're seeking mutual understanding. They're seeking control. The result? You're left shouting into the void while they exit the scene emotionally untouched. And here's where survivors often internalize the harm. Without accountability, your mind turns inward, trying to make sense of the senseless. You start wondering if you were the problem. That's not weakness. It's your brain trying to regain coherence after psychological chaos. Trauma psychologists call this cognitive dissonance recovery, the brain's attempt to reconcile conflicting realities. They said they loved me, and they destroyed me. So what's the way forward? First, understand this. Closure is not something a narcissist will give you. It's something you must build for yourself. Dr. Sherry Steins, a therapist who works with survivors of emotional abuse, calls this self-generated closure. It means writing your own ending when the antagonist refuses to participate in one. That might look like journaling your truth, seeking therapy, or creating rituals of release. Burning old letters, writing unsent goodbyes, reclaiming your story in your own voice. Psychological recovery begins when you stop waiting for them to validate your pain. The justice you seek isn't in their remorse. It's in your healing. Because here's what every expert agrees on. Narcissists don't heal from their behavior. They repeat it. But you can heal from their damage. You can grow, reflect, integrate, and move forward. So, when you think about closure, remember, it's not a scene someone else writes for you. It's a story you author yourself. One grounded in truth, resilience, and self-respect. The narcissist's silence doesn't define your worth. Your recovery does. And that's where your power lies. So take a breath, release the fantasy of their apology, and step into the truth. You don't need their closure to close your chapter. You are the ending and the beginning they'll never understand. Here's the cruel irony of closure when it comes to narcissists. They seem to move on at the speed of light. One moment, you're still reeling from the breakup, trying to process what went wrong. And the next, they're already showcasing a brand new partner as if your relationship never existed. Psychologists like Dr. Ramani Durvasula explain that this rapid replacement isn't proof of emotional strength, but rather a symptom of narcissistic supply dependency. For narcissists, relationships aren't about intimacy or mutual growth. They're about validation. The moment that validation fades, they instinctively hunt for the next source of admiration. So when they move on instantly, it's not love they're chasing, it's oxygen. Meanwhile, you're left suffocating in confusion, wondering how they detached so easily, while they're already rehearsing their next performance. And that's what makes it so emotionally brutal. You're still searching for answers, for accountability, for something that feels real, while they're already rewriting the script. Dr. Craig Malkin, a clinical psychologist and author of Rethinking Narcissism, describes this as emotional dissonance, the moment when the victim's reality and the narcissist's reality no longer align. You're still processing loss, while they're curating an image of triumph. That split in perception is precisely what traps survivors in cycles of self-doubt and anger. Closure becomes impossible, because how can you heal when the person who broke you is pretending nothing ever happened? Then there's the issue of apologies, or rather, the absence of them. Try confronting a narcissist about how quickly they moved on, and you'll see a masterclass in deflection. They'll swear there was no overlap, even if the timeline says otherwise. They'll act offended that you dare question their integrity. Psychologists call this temporal gaslighting, a tactic that distorts memory to protect their fragile ego. According to Dr. Carol McBride, author of Will I Ever Be Free of You, narcissists cannot tolerate guilt or shame, so they rewrite events to keep themselves blameless. This psychological armor shields them from accountability but leaves their victims trapped in disbelief, questioning not only the relationship, but their own perception of reality. And the devastation isn't confined to romance. Narcissistic dynamics ripple through families as well. Maybe it's the sibling who betrayed your trust, or the parent who caused years of emotional harm but never once admitted it. The family carries on as though nothing happened, while you're left holding the invisible trauma. Psychologists like Dr. Lindsay Gibson, author of Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, describe this as collective denial, where entire families protect the narcissist's image to avoid discomfort. In these systems, truth becomes taboo, and closure becomes a myth. The injustice lingers like a haunting. You feel as if life itself forgot to balance the scales. But closure, real closure, is not something another person can grant you. Dr. Judith Herman, one of the world's leading trauma experts, reminds us that closure is born from recognition, from having your pain acknowledged. In healthy breakups, both people can reflect, communicate, and part ways with mutual understanding. You might hurt, but you can still make peace with what was. In narcissistic relationships, that moment of recognition never comes. You're left alone with unanswered questions, while they sprint ahead to their next illusion. It's a different kind of grief, what trauma psychologists call ambiguous loss. You're mourning something that ended, but also something that was never truly real. In time, though, closure has a way of finding you, just not in the way you expect. Sometimes it's years later, when you hear the narcissist's new relationship has fallen apart, or that the very charm that once lured you in has now turned toxic for someone else. You don't feel vindictive, you feel strangely detached. That's because, as Dr. Ramani often says, the best closure is indifference. The moment you stop caring whether they win or lose, you've already won. Your healing no longer depends on their downfall. It depends on your peace. Still, psychologists warn that closure gained too quickly isn't always real closure. If karma came knocking the day after your breakup, you might have felt pity instead of strength. You might have taken them back, hoping they'd changed. Dr. Carol McBride emphasizes that survivors need time to rebuild boundaries and reestablish a sense of self before any true closure can take root. Healing requires space, both emotional and psychological, to see the relationship for what it was, not what you wished it could be. That's why sometimes, time is your greatest ally. When the narcissist eventually circles back, craving your attention, you'll be standing on solid ground, ready to say no. That moment, that clear, confident no, is the sweetest closure of all. Because here's the truth every survivor eventually learns. Narcissists don't move on. They move over. They carry the same emptiness into every relationship, doomed to repeat the cycle. You, on the other hand, evolve. You grow stronger. You begin to understand that their quick replacement was never a reflection of your worth. It was a reflection of their fear. And when that realization finally lands, closure stops being something you wait for. It becomes something you create. Before you go, if this message resonated with you, remember, healing is not a race, it's a reclamation. Take your time. Honor your progress. If you found this video or article insightful, like, share, and subscribe to join a community dedicated to recovery and empowerment. You'll find links below to free resources, including a guidebook and consultation options to support your healing journey. Thank you for being here. Your story matters. Together, we rise, reclaim, and rebuild. Because the greatest revenge against narcissistic harm is not revenge at all. It's freedom.